do you bring the Bible to bear on family life today? I know it's a very broad kind of question, but in your day-to-day ministering to families, preaching, how do you make that connect? Because family was different back then. It's not the same, but yet there are things we can learn, obviously.
As to how Scripture integrates with family life, one of the, I feel like with where my kids are at, it's familiarity with the Scripture, and so you're trying to grab just little tidbits of time,
right,
and hope that you get to stack those tidbits of time to something of real significance. You get 2 minutes while they're at the breakfast table before they head off to school, and to try and impart that, or 5 minutes before they go to bed, to impart that.
So you don't preach sermons to them? You don't make them sit still every day for a 30-minute sermon?
But I do know they're listening to my sermons, because yesterday I gave an illustration of how God has placed a dream inside each one of our hearts, Ecclesiastes 9, that pursue the work that God has set out for us to do. And I had mentioned that Ryan had told me he wanted to be a construction worker, and then when I got back to the pew after the invitation, he said, "Dad, that's not right. I want to be a professional football player." So at least that told me he was listening and he was catching it. So, but what I like to do is to bring up a character like at breakfast.
Oh yeah.
And say, what do y'all know about him? What do you know about David? What do you know about Paul? And sometimes they'll know some things that maybe I've inputted into their life, or Emily has given to them, but they also have had consistent weekly discipleship.
Right.
That their Sunday school teacher in Stanford, their Wednesday night group leader, that there have been other people from the church family that have poured into them. And so one of the questions I asked recently is, how did Joshua and the Hebrew people get across the Jordan River? Did they go on a raft? Did they swim across?
That's a good question.
And they're like, no, they because that's what they had just studied Sunday morning. So I think if you know what they're studying in Bible study,
that's great, on
Sunday morning, you can have those kind of exploring the finer points of the story without necessarily jumping to the moral lesson of it, but helping them see the value of the story of the people in their lives. And so that's one of the kind of games we play. Well, what can you tell me about this person? And then have conversations about it. And by that time, it's time to go to school. And then you pick up something different from that story on the next day. So Emily has poured way more into our kids with scripture memory wise, as far as like the scriptures to memorize, and she has little cards and things like that. And I know she works hard on it. Our kids have been in a new type of experience in Plainview where there's a real emphasis on scripture memory on Wednesday night. And though my wife tried and I tried, they've grown way more from the input of other people.
Isn't that amazing?
Point. So it is good to have a variety of voices speaking into our kids. And we ran into a lady last night at a community meeting in town about helping people that were in challenging situations. And she said, "Just so you know, I corrected your daughter this morning." So it's not always just, because there was something that she said and did. Just because she's my kid, she's not perfect. I can admit that. that she did that's
a big step.
That needed to be corrected, and we're like, "Thank you for doing that," because I believe that moment is going to stick with her for a long time. I know it did with me when I was corrected by people other than my parents. Like, whoa, if they're saying this, I need to really listen. So it is the scripture input and the stories of the Bible that can be really helpful to have other people pour into them, but also the character formation that can come from other people can be very powerful as well.